How are we all this morning? Are we awake? Yeah, good. That's good to know. Well, thank you so much for coming to the Arabian Travel Market Global Halal Tourism Summit, which due to popular demand is now in its third year. So this year's summit looks to the prosperous future of Muslim travel, which is one of the world's fastest growing tourism sectors and as big, if not bigger, than the Chinese travel market. In fact, Muslim spend on travel was valued at $177 billion in 2017, and it's forecast to grow to $274 billion by 2023, according to Dinar Standard. So, at this morning's summit, some leading halal travel experts will discuss the top trends, the growing role of technology in the Muslim travel space, and we'll also have some non-Muslim destinations reveal details of their highly successful halal tourism strategies. So, to kick off the summit, we have three halal tourism specialists with us here today who will talk us through some of the top trends that are dominating the industry and what we can expect in the future. So let me introduce them. To my immediate left here, we have Rafi Shako, who's the CEO, Managing Director at Dinar Standard, which has been tracking and analysing this sector for more than 6 years now. Sitting next to him in the middle there, we have Chris Nader, who's the Vice President of Development at Shaza Hotels. And last but not least, on the end, we have Mamoun Hamdan, who's the Managing Director for the Middle East, North Africa and India at WeGo. So first of all, before we have a bit of a discussion, I'd like to hand over to Rafi. He's going to set the scene a little with a presentation highlighting some of the top halal tourism trends that Dinar Standard has identified. Thanks, Rafi.
Good morning, everyone. Peace and greetings to all. As Gemma mentioned, we have been covering this growing global, quote-unquote, halal travel market for the past almost 10 years now. And I wanted to, as Gemma said, help set the stage for our discussion with a few quick trend highlights. Halal travel, quote unquote, and I put that in quote because people are still debating what does halal travel mean, what is it? Some are calling it Muslim-friendly travel or family-friendly travel. I can say, as analysts in this space, there is an underlying theme which has different definitions or labels. However, there is definitely an underlying theme. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having a session here, and this won't be a trend in which actual investments are happening, actual business is happening, and I wanted to highlight some of those. So just quickly, I'll just go through a quick summary of the main travel facts and figures, halal travel facts and figures, and 4 trends from this year that I'd like to just quickly highlight, and perhaps with our other colleagues on the stage can hear from them and what they think about these trends. So as Gemma already mentioned, when we talk about halal travel, we're essentially talking about outbound travel for the most part in these numbers of Muslims taking travel, traveling for tourism purposes, variety of them, vacation, business included. This does not include Hajj and Umrah. So if you look at all of the global Muslims traveling outbound, our estimate for 2017 was 177 billion. Growing at an annual CAGR growth rate of about 7.6% a year. The key point here to know is, as Gemma already mentioned, is you're talking about a global population of about 1.6 billion people in the world, representing around 25% of the world's population, roughly. And so in terms of travel also, it's almost around 17% of the global outbound travel numbers is what the Muslim travel market represents. Now, how does this relate to halal, or what are aspects uniquely of halal. There are different considerations that are religious, but they are not necessarily the primary consideration. So Muslims travel for generally what other travelers would want to travel for in terms of leisure and sightseeing and heritage, etc. But there's some underlying things that are becoming increasingly important for this audience, and hence why various countries as destinations, hospitality companies, even travel tech is looking at this opportunity to focus on and differentiate themselves. Today we're seeing in terms of the outbound travel spend, GCC, while the GCC represents a small number, the per capita spend of GCC outbound travelers is the highest, as you can see, followed by MENA. Other East Asia is the next big segment. But one of the interesting things we always also mention is if you look at Western Europe and North America, so the Western Muslim market, they are also a significant market. This past year's State of the Global Islamic Economy report that's produced by us in partnership with Thomson Reuters and Dubai Islamic Economy Development Center. We've been doing this for the past 5 years, 6th year is coming up. So you'll see all the detailed number in that report. So I won't go into much more than that. The one thing that's new to highlight is if you look at how much of travel tech investment related to halal travel tech, about 40 million is what we've cataloged from 2015 to 18. So that will be an interesting thing, I'm sure, Vigo and Mahmoud, when we come to what Vigo is doing, and there are other players that are focusing on this segment. In terms of travel trends in 2019, here's sort of the landscape, but there are 4 that I'll quickly go through. First one is there is now a within the OIC market. So when I say OIC, there are about 57 Muslim majority countries that are part of this Organization of Islamic Cooperation multilateral entity. So within them, there's now an interest in sustainable tourism as well. So I'll touch on that because we feel there's a link to halal tourism given its ethical underpinning. Second is Umrah travel. So as many of you know, Saudi Arabia with their Vision 2030, they're opening up and tourism is a big part of their Vision 2030 strategy, and then specifically Umrah is the big trend to focus on for this year. We're also looking seeing OIC countries starting to do strategic initiatives around halal travel. And then I'll touch briefly on the VC interest or the investments that are coming into halal travel space. Yeah. So quickly going through this, there are about 3, most of you would know about SDG goals. There are about 3 SDGs that are directly linked to tourism. Number 8 on inclusive and sustainable economic growth. Number 12 on sustainable consumption and production. And number 14 on sustainability of oceans and marine resources. So these are the ones that UNWTO has already aligned. And we have been working with OIC. We did a report on OIC countries looking at sustainable tourism and SDGs linking to their tourism strategy. So there is now within OIC countries a focus on these, and we see halal tourism in a way complementing or contributing to that story. The third thing I talked about is OIC countries are aggressively, such as Saudi Arabia, UAE, Malaysia we already know of. A lot of the European countries, Spain, and we're going to have some case studies later on, Gemma, with Japan and others, who are also looking at the Muslim tourism market or travel market. But here's an example of a Muslim majority country that also aggressively has a halal market strategy. In full disclosure, I'm actually a formal representative of Indonesia's Ministry of Tourism on their halal tourism strategy. But to highlight the fact that they are aggressively pursuing this and they have a strategy on having some target pairing of cities in Indonesia with source markets for Muslim target markets, and then positioning. For example, within GCC, the halal label doesn't work. And we had a brief conversation with my friend on the panel here earlier. So in the GCC, the positioning is more family-friendly travel. But in other markets, Western Muslim market, you can explicitly label halal, and that does appeal. So that's example. A few things in regards to investments. There's some investments happening. Along the lines of, we cataloged about $78 million of disclosed venture capital going to digital Islamic economy space from 15 to 18. Again, in our annual report, this is all detailed out, of which about 40 million related to travel tech. One of the highlights this past year was Holiday ME got a Series C round, and they have engaged with TripFez, and I think we have Faiz here with us today as well to talk about the exciting things that's happening there. So there is some VC interest that's generating. There's also media and recreation, and they link to travel because they all feed off of the consumer travel trend here. The next one I highlighted was Umrah. So within Saudi Arabia, I mean, I don't know, it may or may not be a surprise to many, but just the Umrah market is a $31 billion annual travel market. And this is the religious travel that's not obligatory, which is Hajj, but this is the one that Muslims come to Saudi Arabia. And this is now identified as a very strong growth area for Saudi Arabia in terms of the tourism expansion. We estimate Umrah is going to grow to about 49 billion by 2030. The Ministry of Hajj and Umrah is introducing new initiatives to streamline the visa processing, which has been a big pain point, but it's all going to get enabled through online issuance, which is allowing for a lot of travel tech players to really tap into this, including Holiday ME and some of the big players, Booking.com, Agoda, etc. They're all looking to partner with the ministry and offering. We're also looking at some of the initiatives around this. So yeah, so that's some highlights.
Fantastic, thank you. Thanks, Rafi. Come and sit down. Well, I'm sure you agree that was a really insightful presentation, so thank you for that, Rafi. I think I'd like to start off by asking our panelists how those trends resonate with them. Have they noticed the same thing, or maybe they've noticed something different? Start with Chris, why not?
Sure, with pleasure. Good morning, Assalamu alaikum. It's very interesting to see how those trends that are done in a completely third-party objective manner resonate with what we're doing. And to be honest, we do use their report in our standards reports and research, and it's really helpful to get a global view on what's happening. In our industry, we tend to be very hotel-driven, hotel-specific, and we only look at what we're doing, and we forget to see the global picture. So this is very insightful. Obviously, when we talk about trend, we cannot say this is a 2018 trend, this is 2000. It's not like fashion where you have to change every season. Trends are there to last for 5, 10 years because they're linked to generations. Today, when we looked at the markets, the halal market and the Muslim travelers, the large majority, I think about 50, 60% of the population is a mix of Generation Z and millennials. And this generation is the one setting those trends that you spoke about. If you're in the hotel business or in the tech, halal tech side, and you want to appeal to this generation, you have to see what they want. And this is why we've seen this growth in tech investment into the halal spectrum. And this is also reflected in our hotel industry. If I take one trend that you highlighted, which is very true, which is the sustainable side of travel, we are seeing from the guest standpoint a lot of interest, whether on social media discussions, whether it's on the way, the key searches that they do when they're trying to book a hotel or look at the destinations. Sustainability is very important. It's not only Muslim travelers. The entire Gen Z, millennial type of global market cares about this. What we did here in the UAE, we opened a property in Sharjah called Kingfisher that is operated by our upscale brand, Misk by Shaza. You can't miss it if you're walking outside. There's a 50-meter ad on the door about it. this lodge, this retreat, is 20 private tents, private swimming pools, and it's sitting on an eco-reserve. It's a plastic-free environment. It's an eco-reserve where all the animals come to breed, where you're really seeing the unique raw nature of Sharjah, which is very beautiful. It's on the Omani coast side, not on this coast. And we're seeing so much positive feedback from guests saying, oh, wow, finally, I can actually get, a resort that is embracing some of my values and giving me the privacy. The whole emirate of Sharjah is dry, so alcohol is really not a topic. But at the same time, I'm experiencing the local culture. I'm connecting with the eco side of things. So these are the added values that we have to think about when we're developing new destinations.
Great, thanks, Chris. That was really good. Mamoon, I mean, what trends did you find that Rafi was talking about that resonate with your findings at WeGo?
See, at WeGo, being a travel marketplace or search engine, as we call it, operating in Southeast Asia and Middle East for the past 14 years, we always noticed that the behavior in terms of travelers from the Southeast Asia market compared to the travelers from the region are completely different. Especially when you go into we were just discussing about it with Rafi, especially when you go into the halal sector and the definition of halal for them and what means to them. They treat it completely differently, but what we've been seeing as a trend recently, and it's increasing, is the solo woman travelers from this part of the world. I mean, this is, I think, an area that we are not seeing a lot, and we see lots of offering happening around it. I think there is a big room for that. As Chris mentioned, it's all driven by millennials and the generation, the Z at the moment. They're setting the trends for everything, obviously. But yeah, there are new destinations popping up just out of nowhere. Traditional destinations are kind of behind a little bit with their offering for that. They need to catch up quickly. The new destinations building their stuff immediately from scratch today to capture this generation, the halal-friendly sort of offering they are providing for Muslim travelers. To Rafi's point earlier, yes, we noticed over the past 2 years from this part of the world, there was a noticeable sort of increase on demand on unusual halal-friendly destinations since they started announcing those kind of offering to the audience. So somewhere like Japan, South Korea, South Africa, those typically are not really a halal-friendly destinations. But the moment they start putting those investments, start putting them in front of people, reaching out to them through social media, featuring those kind of offering, the moment we started seeing increase in demand on that.
Interesting. And you mentioned there quickly about how, so you're saying the Asian market understands what halal friendly is or halal tourism, but the Middle East prefers the term family friendly?
Kind of, yeah. I think people from this part of the world take the halal part as kind of for granted, and they treat it a bit easier. So even if they go to a destination that doesn't really provide that sort of service, food, for example, they will figure out a way, the pizza will do in a way. But I did participate to a panel similar to this 2 years ago in Singapore, where we were discussing this, and in the panelists, I had somebody from Indonesia and somebody from Malaysia, and their description for it was completely different. They wanted an accommodation literally nearby the mosque and somewhere that they can experience and do all the Muslim practice on daily basis within the right place, within the right sort of offering. They cared a lot about this kind of offering, unlike people traveling from this part of the world. But for them, yeah, we can take this easy while we are traveling, and we can figure out a way to perform what we want to perform to make our trip within the halal scope that we care about.
Okay, interesting.
Gemma,
yes.
If I may, what we see in our space is that when you're talking to the investment community, you need to give it a label. They need to understand what you're talking about, whether it's halal friendly, etc. when you're talking to B2C, to your end user, to the guest, he needs to know that those values or facilities or services are available, but they don't want to see that branding in their face everywhere.
Right.
Because they need to know it's there, but it's more either a cultural approach to things or a wellness approach. And the difficulty we have in the industry and all of us is the terminology we use is to adapt our speech to the audience or the purpose of where we are. And we always quoted saying, oh, but you said it's called like this, now you're calling it like this. Well, we have to adapt to the audience.
That's really interesting, thank you. So what I was thinking was if it's mainly Gen Z and millennials driving it, but with calling it family friendly, they might not be the people that have families yet. So like you're saying, it's quite difficult. I mean, is this kind of cross-generational, the trend between how Asian market and the Middle East market or Western markets, for example, would view halal travel? Has anyone got a view on that? Rafi, that'll be you.
I think the labeling thing, in many ways we've kind of gone past it, and covering this wider halal or Islamic economy space. If I do a parallel with, let's say, Islamic finance, and let's do a parallel with modest or fashion, I feel fashion has dealt with the labeling issue very effectively, where it's completely mainstreamed. So, today, no one calls it halal fashion or Muslim fashion or, to a certain extent, maybe Islamic fashion, but it's become accepted as modest fashion.
Yeah. I guess that's a bit more obvious, though, isn't it? Through images and things, wouldn't you say?
Right, but still, I think initially there was a struggle with, should you call it, again, the definition of modesty within Islamic fashion is actually something unique, so it should be Islamic. But I think it's settled down to where it's now globally become an accepted trend of modest fashion, bringing in the wider thinking around modest fashion. So I think with travel, this is a struggle. However, as Chris, and I think those who are practitioners who are already doing it, I think their reality is telling, which is, when you talk to the customer, you got to put what the customer is comfortable with. The industry does need a label. That's why you call this session a halal travel session, because you needed to call it something. Yeah. I've seen, in some areas you're calling it Muslim friendly, but halal and Muslim friendly from an industry point of view, I think is what's working. Sure. And then, but from a consumer point of view, it's very demographically driven. So, the Western Muslim market is very comfortable with calling it halal halal travel, and they're looking for halal travel areas. But the audience here is not, absolutely not. In fact, it is a turnoff to the Muslim travel audience when you're, when you call your destination. We saw it in Indonesia clearly, where a lot of the hospitality brands struggled with it and are not calling it, explicitly halal, while they're, to Chris's point, the proposition is addressing it, but not in their face.
Actually, to add on that, I mean, to your point, I remember 3-4 years ago, we had an internal discussion within the company that do we need to add a filter within our, hotels offering called halal, and people just need to click and, shortlist all the halal. We had a big debate, yes, no, needed, not, different geographies. At the end, we did sort of an A/B test for it. And we put it from this part of the world. Actually, nobody really cared about it.
What about from other markets?
Well, yeah. Again, if you look at it from Asia, yes. If you look at it from, we're not that big in Europe, but whatever traffic we get there, you could see it a bit. But again, to Rafi's points, pretty much driven by consumer, and it's very different from market to another, the way they do treat it completely.
So what do you do at WeGo then to try to appeal to the Muslim travel market without saying, hey, this is a halal holiday?
Yeah, we do a lot of work on the social media. We have a blog here that we try to put lots of stories. We work with tourism boards on, we work with Sharjah Tourism Board, we work with many tourism boards, Indonesia. we try to get offerings from them. We try to educate people about what options they have when they travel. We use the map quite aggressively. We make sure that we have all ways and options for people to look for a property nearby a mosque or nearby an attraction that would be interesting for a Muslim traveler. So we try to do all of that. We build our we try to implement lots of the new technology and data-driven sort of approach to our marketing right now.
So social media is playing a big role, isn't it?
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah. I'd like to talk a bit more about experiential travel. I mean, I know, Chris, in the past, you've said that kind of, Muslim travellers are fed up with just, being given a bog standard, hotel that's, in the past we called it Sharia compliant, didn't we? It's, like we're saying, it keeps changing names, but now you're offering these new experiences. Can you tell us a bit more about, some of the products, perhaps? You talked about one of them, the Kingfisher Lodge. Some of the other products that people are demanding.
Yeah, the global trends is that any traveler is really sick of being just in a concrete block and sitting in a room and call it a hotel. I mean, we're really past that stage. In the past here, used to build anything and people would come and fill it up. And then as travelers started to become more and more aware about cultural experiences, authenticity, and especially with that new generation, the shift has moved away from, okay, this is just a hotel, to what is it you're going to offer me that will make a difference? The halal travel, in the past, it says, okay, if I have a hotel and I don't offer alcohol and I have halal food and prayer facilities, everyone will run and come because, no one's doing it.
Yeah.
10 years ago, it was maybe the case. Today, there are so many options, especially in this part of the world and even in Asia, that you have to bring something new. Obviously, the biggest trend and challenge at the same time is the resort side of our industry, because the city hotel is, but providing that privacy that guests want, providing the facilities that are, at the same time entertaining and you feel you're sitting in a resort, but at the same time you have the privacy, you have those elements to it. It's a challenge to find that mix. But whenever now we're doing a resort, we have to have a resort that is meaningful to the local culture, where people can actually connect. We're doing 2 more destinations in Sharjah that are also part of the Sharjah collection, to either give them an amazing spa experience facing a mountain, Fossil Rock, where there is archaeology, history, camping on the mountain and going down to your spa on the 4x4s or on a horse even. And for instance, or going camping in the desert, you have your private tent in front of the dunes, you do activities related there to adventure and culture. So this is for this part of the world. But what now we're focusing on, and that's most of the time we're spending in terms of development, what Rafi was mentioning earlier in his presentation, is the other markets that are emerging. We've established the brand in the Middle East in the last 10 years. And now we're growing outside. We're developing a resort in Turkey. We're discussing 3 projects in Morocco. We've had a lot of interest in the Andalusian part of Spain. We also started negotiating a project in the UK.
Right, okay. Interesting.
And obviously one cannot forget about Indonesia, which is really leading the halal travel segment.
As Rafi was saying.
And as he was saying. And we're actually developing 2 resorts on the island of Lombok.
Wow.
Right next to Bali. And these resorts have gone really, we developed the concept, the architecture, etc. It's really going to be exciting. One for Sharjah, one for Misk, so luxury and upscale. We're now going out to investors to try to raise some equity. If anyone's interested, we'll be happy to talk to you. So it's really taking the experience we built here and the brand we built here and expanding it.
This is actually a big deal, because let's face it, until now, it'd only really been Turkey that had these resorts. Turkey had become known as the place for, sorry to use the term, halal-friendly resorts. So this is actually quite, this is breaking news.
Yes, Egypt as well, I forgot to
Yeah.
mention, which is not Middle East, it's Egypt, it's North Africa. Even Turkey, if I may, because we're discussing now a big resort in the south of Turkey,
Right.
in the region that is known for halal-friendly resorts. But if I might say, and apologies if I have Turkish audience here, the quality of those resorts is really nothing to write home about. It's just trying to meet basic needs.
Yes, yeah.
Do it in a mom and pop type of way.
Sure.
And what we're doing is really we're bringing those international standard distribution experiences to really create something and disrupt that market a bit that has been dormant, and it's the way it operates. But now you need to.
Now, obviously, what you're talking about, experiential travel, and also, providing people with more than just a hotel, it really brings in kind of partnerships, doesn't it? Rafi, have you seen that in destinations where, on the experiential travel side of things, destinations are really working, many stakeholders working together to provide that 360 experience for Muslim travellers? I mean, Indonesia, for example.
Yeah, most definitely, and I think I had a mention about the homestay
Yes.
aspect that they're targeting the Western Muslim audience for.
Okay.
So definitely, I think experiential travel, obviously for a destination like Indonesia, which is all about experience, and it's got thousands of islands and a lot of heritage and a lot of culture. So I think and Turkey as well in many ways. I mean, these destinations lend themselves to a strong experiential proposition. So you see destination management organizations pushing for engagement with obviously the hospitality resorts to engage and partner. In Indonesia, for example, they did like a national contest of identifying resorts who would like to engage this audience, and sort of got some partnerships going with various resorts in Indonesia to sort of highlight their credentials and improve their credentials. Interestingly, in Indonesia, the halal credentials are actually weaker than in Bangkok. So, when you go and eat in a restaurant and, when you're traveling around Indonesia, it's just not clear if, what part of it is halal or not. Comparatively, Bangkok is much more, clear.
Yeah.
You know what you're going to get. And so that's something infrastructure-wise they're addressing. So they're partnering with obviously the restaurants, the resorts, and improving their capacities.
Okay. Brilliant. Now, I'm going to ask the audience to ask some questions in a minute. There's just two other things I want to touch on. I'm not going to talk too much about tech in this session because the next session is dedicated to investment in technology and new technology platforms, one of which is launched today. So very exciting. That's coming up next. But having said that, Mamoon, is there anything in the tech space that you'd like to highlight, given you're in that space?
Well, I think, again, within the new trends and what's been built and designed to cater for the halal friendly travel, I think there are, like we spoke about Saudi earlier and what's going on now with that.
This is what I was going to come on to, so great, keep going.
So, like digitizing the whole Hajj and Umrah process, I think this is something that should have been addressed 5-6 years ago. However, it's never too late. They're going really fast and rapidly into this. I think this will unlock loads and loads of opportunities, from business to investments to partnerships. I mean, as also you mentioned, like we see lots of the OTAs developing, working hard on doing that. There is a new visa system to be applied in Saudi, A, to be able to process everything online, B, there are lots of visa on arrivals to be announced soon from many countries. The Umrah visa specifically is going to be open up to discover the country. So this will lead lots of investments within the tech space, within the digital space, building dedicated products for that. I think we're not doing enough yet with the data we capture. about that.
Right.
Anybody in the tech space.
Yep.
Because of the definition, because of how would you define and capture that data and put it under the Muslim friendly or halal sort of travel. But once that's been defined, and I think it is there right now, I think this will unlock a lot of opportunities.
So do you mean more personalization in that space?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That goes along with the with the messaging, with
Yeah.
putting the destination in front
Sure.
of people,
Yeah.
giving sort of an idea for hoteliers to start building and design their hotels, cater to that segment, provide the travelers with the experience they would expect and they would look for.
Actually, we're talking a lot to the tech companies, the booking engines, etc.
Sure.
When we're, for instance, I go to a new destination, I want to do a resort, I have to go to these guys who have all the data and ask them, what do people search for? What do they want? What
Yes.
shall I do? It's completely useless that I build a resort that I think will work for the market, whereas
Yeah.
actually they're looking for something else. So the collaboration across the industry is so important to get your products
Yeah,
right on point.
that's right, yeah. Brilliant. Okay, well, do we have any questions from the audience? Who would like to ask one or all of our panelists a question? If you'd like to put your hand up. There must be one. No questions? Oh, there we do. One at the back, thank you. We have the roaming mic, please. Thank you.
Courageous one.
Good morning, everybody. So, I just have a question to the Vigo exactly. You being a meta search engine, and what was the way that you have to be projected in your parameters, like this halal standards or salam standards? What is the filter parameter that you are bringing in your meta search engine? You are trying to bring it, because today, if I want to go to Vigo and I search for some hotels in the Vigo, now I really want to know the swimming pool, which should be separate for ladies and gents. If there is a filter that you are planning to bring into your meta search engine, and how are you going to generalize this content, because you have so many OTAs in your listed in your Vigo actually?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. See, generally, yes, we are having the plan to put that and to add that filter. It's not only on the hotel space, even within the mapping of the airports around the world, who's got a prayer room, who's not. The struggle or the pain point here, that being a search engine, we need the providers to give us with this all of these kind of information. It's a query-based sort of business. So basically, we get the consumer to put the filter, ask, demand for the trip he wants to do, but then we need our partners to be technically capable and able to send back all of these answers. Today, unfortunately, majority of the companies, speaking of what we've been speaking about for the past half an hour, that nobody really looked into this yet and put the right definition. So if I'm going to be a bit technical here. So if our API calls one of our partners' API today, telling him, return back to me, hotels only provide, a swimming pool, separate swimming pool, halal food, halal restaurant, I wouldn't get an answer. And it's where we lack a little bit. We're working on it. I think, again, it is trending. It is a growing market. We've been talking about it for a bit. And I think everybody is kind of, if you look at Holiday Me, you mentioned them, Rafi, yeah, they're building that and they're going to have that. And this is one of our partners that we are going to rely on at the very beginning now to get all of this information. Agoda is getting into the space and creating that. The only kind of option we kind of have right now, and it's been successful, is basically the alternative accommodation. So since we added the kind of Airbnbs and HomeAways and that kind, we started seeing people using the map, looking for an accommodation nearby a mosque, having a swimming pool that they can use. They're kind of building their own experience, not relying completely on the digital side of a hotel. And that's been we've seen it as a growing segment. And on the other side, because it's a C2C business, as you know, so that the advertiser, the owner of the property, is also putting within his description of his property, it has this, it has that. you know, I can add a bar, I can remove a bar, you know, like
Sure.
that's another growing segment and another growing business that getting to cater this. Maybe it wasn't meant to build this way, but it's being used as it is, and I think it's going to grow more and more. So
Great. Well, Mahmood, stay for the next session because we've got a couple of guys that might be able to help you on our panel. So
sure.
we have time for one last question. Oh,
2 questions.
maybe two quick questions at the front here. We had the mic at the front. Thank you. This gentleman here first. Thank you.
See, my name is Muthu. I am coming from a group of islands in the Arabian Sea where 100% are Muslims, a small area. Their main thing is the tourism also. Why I got attracted to this is the word halal. The next word is haram. I'm talking about the first impression is the best impression. We were talking about the Umrah and Hajj. And the Saudi has identified that is the maximum tourism, even though it is not a tourism. Restricted to Islam. Here halal word also gives that. I feel branding requires in a much, much better way to give a clarity to others that it is not totally Islamic and it is something else. That is it.
So, do you have a question for one of our panelists, or it was more
Branding, that is what? Branding.
So, what brand? Well, we kind of touched upon how
we need to have
the messaging.
an identified and some sort of a new branding to give you an idea that it is not only restricted to Islam and all that.
So it's not religious tourism; it's halal friendly
This
tourism.
is why in our branding we actually never call our hotel company as a halal-friendly company
Sure.
or anything. We provide a culture experience, and actually in one of our properties here in Oman, in Muscat, the majority of our guests are non-Muslim. They come because it's a beautiful hotel, great service, very nice location, and whether you don't have alcohol, have prayer rooms, for them it really doesn't matter, because they look at the other side of the experience. And this is how we're actually positioning ourselves to go to your point.
So it's kind of a bit of a battle, really, this whole branding thing. I guess we'll kind of get there in the end. We had one question, and then we'll have to wrap it up and move on to the next session.
Yeah, thank you. This is Imtiaz Mukbul from Travel Impact Newswire in Bangkok. Just actually to follow up that point made by Chris, if you take a medium-term view over, say, the next 5 to 10 years, this whole concept of halal, how actually important is it going to be within the whole branding sphere at all? I mean, it's now the flavor of the month because the size of the market is good. But given the fact that if you're talking about the young generation overall worldwide and across all religions and faith, there is a dilution across all religions of people giving that much importance, especially among the young generation, to any religion. And because of the whole halal concept being very closely associated with the Islamic values and the young generation slowly moving away from that, what is the prognosis for this whole concept of halal branding over the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, it looks as if it's going to pretty much go extinct on its own.
That's for
Rafi?
Well, I'd say the trend lines showed to the contrary. Couple of things. Number one is if you look at Pew Global Study on religious affiliations, not just amongst Muslims, but Christian faith and other faith groups, it's going to continue to be there. You're right, it's reducing, but we actually have been projecting and looking at data 50 years out, and the role of faith in general, it's not going to go extinct. It's tapering up and down, but it's going to grow in a net way. Second aspect that lends itself to the halal part of things is the demographic of the Muslim world. It's one of the it is the fastest growing demographic in the world. It's got the youngest population, to the point about millennial and Gen Z. The global average age today is 34. The average age among Muslim countries is 22. So it's a younger generation, it's growing fast, the population numbers are growing fast, the religious affiliation is not going down. Another contributing aspect, more of an unfortunate one, is this, quote unquote, a bit of Islamophobia that's creeping or that's there, especially within the Muslim markets. It's also pushing the young toward that identity, some aspect of a, not religious necessarily, but a cultural or lifestyle identity, which you see very strongly today in modest fashion, and they're all linked. The reason why I say is these are all linked. If you look at where Islamic finance is growing, how modest fashion is growing, they all link to how halal travel will be growing, because it's all the same customer base, and that sentiment is evidence in these other segments that we're also seeing, halal food, etc. So I don't see it going away. I think what it will happen is it will mature in terms of its branding and how it's perceived. I see it hopefully taking the place of sustainability, because the underpinning of halal is ethical. And I think in travel space, this aspect is, we're seeing it's coming in food, we're seeing it's coming in fashion, i.e. sustainable fashion, and we see sustainable tourism as Chris mentioned, that this customer base is concerned about these values. And the good thing is it will relate to the wider global values-based proposition. So.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you.